All right. So just a little bit of background and context. It is that we've been doing this Future Proof course, and we've been inviting guest experts onto it. And a lot of the questions and comments that we've had have been about the art of storytelling and telling our own story. So in the age of acceleration that's sort of my Future Proof book is based on, I think you need to be able to craft your story more now than ever before. You know, there's a lot of noise, not a lot of signal, and you need people to know what you do and who you are in a way that brings people to you for awesome projects and also allows them to understand what you're all about and connect with you and sort of bring that whole network together. So there were a ton of questions, and we were thinking, who knows how to tell a story better than anybody that I know? And of course, Angie Lau, the woman that I first met in preparation for my TEDx talk, who also has an amazing TEDx talk about voice and finding your voice, came first to mind. So Angie, I am so honored that you would take the time out of your busy schedule to have this intimate chat with all of us.
My honor. Thank you so much for what you do, Diana. I mean, you've inspired countless people, and for you to create this community of people who just aspire to learn more, to be more themselves, it speaks to my heart. So I'm in it with you, sister.
So you're in, woo! So
totally, all in.
So the thing that that in particular I think is fascinating is that I've known you as Bloomberg anchor, I've known you as like kick-ass nonprofit queen, and I've known you as launching your fashion capsule collection. I don't have the fashion vocabulary to even track you or describe you. And now like Forkast.news, which is a fantastic new news group that is focused on all things blockchain. And so like, how do you tell that story when somebody's like, hey, you're Angie Lau, so tell me about yourself? How do you do that?
You know, it is, there's many facets to all of us, and each chapter is uniquely tied to one thread, and that one thread is you. What I actually did a masterclass for executive leadership program for AHA yesterday on personal branding, and I kind of wanted to take exception to that word because I think it's a really cynical, slightly cynical word. It's very trendy, branding, but you know, are we marketing ourselves or are we telling our story? So that's why we love the fact that you've called this storytelling. So hello, everybody. It's nice to get to know you. I'm a 20-year broadcast veteran, and I have covered the story of change my entire life. And it is simply the one thing that is the common thread for me is that from the perspective of a young immigrant child in Canada, and I was the only Asian face in school, and recognizing that knowledge empowers, and you didn't have that knowledge. And sometimes, you know, my parents didn't have that knowledge, that I really saw vulnerability and people taking advantage of us. And I think that's what really inspired me to be a journalist. It's baked into my personal DNA. Everything that I do is about the fact that I am in service. I am in service to my audience. You know, often people ask me, hey, what do you do as an anchor? And my answer was always, I'm an advocate for the audience. And that spirit is pretty much everything that I did as a broadcast journalist when I was at Bloomberg, when I joined the Lee Ka-shing Foundation, when I did the fashion capsule line, because I love it. It's what I love to do. It was a fun opportunity, but it was empowering, you know, and I even, you know, the language in which I really communicated what this fashion capsule was to empower women to feel comfortable in their skin, in their clothes, that the clothes was so comfortable that, you know, you could show up. And, you know, it was so versatile that it empowered you to feel good about yourself every day. And then to Forkast.news, which was Forkast was a recognition from myself that I wanted to learn more about emerging technology. I wanted to learn more about blockchain. And there was just such a vacuum of knowledge. And I felt that, and this is what I often say, you know, I'm the mother of a little boy. He's now almost 3 years old. And he shook me out of my matrix. And I had a decision to make. I could either sunset my career, a very linear career, or I could try to remain impactful to him. And all of the things that I have done since then, since he was born, is really a testament to him. And Forkast is really an homage to that spirit, which is, if you don't understand the future, you will never see your place in it. And that, for me, would be a tragedy. As a mother and seeing the generation around us, and that includes us. But if we at Forkast can help you understand it a little bit more clearly, that inspires you to forge your path in the future and to create your own role in the future, then we will have done our job. So it really comes from a place of knowledge empowers. Those two words are my personal credo. It's what drives me. It's baked into the DNA of everything that I do. And so that is a very disparate story. It is my story, and I share it freely with you. And
with a lot of vulnerability as well. So I appreciate that.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that, because the true power of storytelling, and I'm a communicator. How do I reach
you make
across?
it look easy.
I don't know any of you people, but I feel like I do. It's the empathy. It is the spirit in which you present yourself. If I were just a mask and I just repeated the lines on my resume, I mean, without sharing the humanity, without sharing the intimacy, would we have a conversation of trust? That is the one thing that I have learned as a communicator. Certainly when I was sitting and talking to a camera to 1 million people around the world, and yet I hoped, and my style was always hoping that I could reach across through the camera to you, make you smile inadvertently without you even knowing it, touch your heart in a certain way. That is really the soul of communication. Vulnerability is a critical part of that. And so when I talk about the power of storytelling, the true power is actually stripping away the artifice, stripping away the technique, stripping away the hacks. You know, think of people naked in their underwear and it's less intimidating. like please just push that all aside. It's not about tactics. It's about truly the work that you will do as you. Because this is not about storytelling. When you open your mouth, you are communicating yourself. Most of us feel really intimidated by that. And I have learned not to be intimidated by that, because it is what I realized in my 20 years of doing this every day, day in, day out, day in, day out. And I'll tell you, it is not about technique. The moment I truly felt that I was my true voice, my true magic, was when I stopped caring about what other people thought of me. And so that meant I stopped censoring myself. I stopped thinking about the words for fear of being judged before I spoke them. I stopped that. And this is truly from the heart. This is communicating your soul. This is communicating. And as you strip that away and you strip away that artifice, that's the real work. The art comes from sitting in your vulnerability and being really comfortable sharing it. Because that's the only way to get to trust. That's the only way to get to trust.
Oh, I love the
so
idea.
I'm really glad you used that.
I love the idea that of trust as one of the biggest aspects of the art of storytelling, and I do think that having that one thread, what you described when you first started about, you talked about being an advocate for your audience and thinking about what is the sort of commonality among the things that I do, because a number of the people that I'm talking to have they have a portfolio career. So they sit on one board, or they have, very different things going on. And so finding that thread is something that we've talked about, and being able to also talk about the motivation. So telling the story about why you do what you do, in addition to the commonality. I think it's great to be vulnerable, and that it takes a certain kind of confidence, but then there's another kind of confidence, which one of our folks, Scott Bunny, who's not able to be with us, sent a question in about, which is really getting over the concern or fear that people may not want to even be interested in your story. So you've like finally got the confidence to be vulnerable, and then you're like talking about your personal story or narrative. How do you mitigate the risk of coming across as self-absorbed, or like why should anybody care about this?
But this is what I mean. When Scott's question is so reflective of the fear that we all place on ourselves. Think of I loved his question. It was very vulnerable. He shared it. But he shared his fear. He shared his insecurity. And he's not sure if people care about his story. Now, the perspective in which anyone asks this question, this is a very common question, by the way. The perspective in which people usually ask this question is, I hope they really like me. What if they judge me? What if my story doesn't matter? All of a sudden, like, oh my God, my chest is starting to get tight, all of these, the framing, the paradigm of you put yourself out there waiting to be judged, right? And this is the whole point of vulnerability. Sure, I can judge you in the same way that all of you are judging me right now, or not. It's none of my business. It's none of my business to care or think about the words that are coming out of my mouth to serve you, or maybe you. Maybe, if Celine likes something that I said, but, I saw Walter's face and didn't like it. So I'm going to shift and change. That's an inconsistency. We blame our politicians for doing that all the time. You want to serve everyone, and in serving everyone, you never serve yourself. And that's the art of storytelling. You must serve yourself first in the purest form. If you honor your story and you say, why wouldn't anybody want to hear this story? And guess what? Everybody will want to hear that story. But if you think from the paradigm of, why would anybody want to hear this story? And then it starts to bleed and impose, that energy starts to impose on how you share your story, that takes on a different energy, right? I think the true power of storytelling is when you show up. And I want to talk about Scott's question very, very, very specifically. How do you mitigate the risk of coming across as self-absorbed? Okay. You don't. but it's also none of your business. It's none of your business it can't be. It can't be your business. Your business is your story. So that's number one. Number two, when I say I'm an advocate for the audience, it's that I share my story in the perspective of how can I be helpful to you? So I'm talking about myself right now. My goodness. Angie's talking about herself, her story, but I am doing it in service to you. I'm very, very clear on that. And so if you say you are in front of a stage of 10 people, or maybe even 1,000 people, but if you can think about it, not from your framework of, I want to be here so everybody thinks I'm amazing, then yes, you will come across as self-absorbed, right? But if your motivation is, my goodness, I'm so grateful to have this platform so I can teach, so I can share, so I can inspire, so I can help, so I can help that one person, right? That's, when you flip that switch in your brain, you will never come across as self-absorbed, even if the only person that you're talking about is yourself, because you'll be creating bridges of empathy. You know, I tell the story of a mother. I'm a mother of the 3-year-old. You know, that connection. If you're a parent, even if you're not a parent, you know I love my child. I'm very honest of the fact that, you know, for a lot of people, when there is a life event, you do get shook out of your paradigm. This is just what has evolved past that. It's a Genesis story. It's a story I'm willing to share. That transformation was not planned. None of this is planned. This is why the power of storytelling is really critical. It's not a planned career. It's not planned strategic moves. I mean, it was, after I left Bloomberg, my ego really needed a big name like Li Ka-shing creating a role for me in his organization. My ego really needed that because I was really afraid. I had no idea what I was going to do. And then I got even more inspired. I learned even more about myself during that experience. It's the most glorious experience I ever had in my entire life because it brought me here. And so it doesn't make sense for other people, but this is the spirit in which I share my story, because now you get how I think, how I feel, my values, my morals, my motivation. This is the power of story, and you got to share every aspect of it.
So that is a great lead-in to Emily's question, which I think I understand, and I love the idea that, and have used the idea that if one person can benefit from this story that I tell, then it'll be worth it. And that's the spirit in which we try to serve these stories up. But Emily said you were saying share every aspect, and she had asked, when is it oversharing? You know, how do you decide what's oversharing?
Of course. But you know when it's oversharing.
But usually it's after you've already said it.
But this is the practice, right? Like this is the practice. Ask yourself why you shared it in the first place. Does it create a bond with your audience, right? So give me an example. Give me an example of where, Emily, you think that people might have overshared. Think about, I would ask everybody this. Think about that example in your brain. It's usually out of context, right? Oh, you overshared because there's no context to it. It's like, why are you telling me that? You name dropped something, or you shared this thing. It's completely out of the blue, completely out of context, right? It's about context. And so Just think about that. If you're sharing it, what's motivating you to share it? What is it serving? What does it provide deeper understanding in? Am I oversharing that I'm a mother of two? If I left it there, I am a mother of two. I'm a human baby and a startup. So I usually just correction. I have one little boy. I have a human baby I have a real baby and a startup. Is that oversharing? It's not oversharing in the context of what I'm doing. So I would put it like that. Like, you can share little details and snippets that allow people to see you in an intimate way, but it almost always must serve the context of what you're doing. So yeah, sometimes people overshare, and the reaction usually comes from, why are you telling me this, right? It's like, why are you telling me this? If you don't know why you're telling somebody that, and it becomes a contrivance or a technique or a tip that you're using artificially, then practice it more. If you put just through the filter of, I'm serving my audience and everything that I share is in service to the story, to my story, to the audience, so that they can understand a little bit more about what I've done. And in so doing, I can share a little bit more about what they can do, about what you're doing, and how can we share in this journey together. I think if you think about it through that paradigm, that could be helpful.
So I loved what you said, because there's a couple of things that I think are useful. And, you know, forgetting the hacks of, you know, imagining everybody in the audience naked or whatnot. The idea that you don't have to share everything all at once, that you can have small snippets of things that you can kind of test to see if this context that you're in is useful. So for instance, a lot of times I think that things have changed over time, but there was a time when you wouldn't talk so much about, you know, your out of work life at all in an office. And so I think that that's sort of changing, but you do have to test the waters. So being able to not just come in and be like, here I am, and here's my whole life, being able to sort of test the waters and have small things that you can try and see what the reaction is and kind of go forward in terms of how you can build trust with other people, or how well knowing that serves them. It is great. I really like that. And yep.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Because you said something really cool. It used to be once upon a time, I don't care what I don't care what you do after you go home. You just need to show up, be the cog in the machine, and that's it. That's the Industrial Revolution, like circa, 19th century, top down. That is not our workforce. That is not, this is not where we are in terms of technology. Like this is the whole purpose of your book, right? And so, yeah, I kind of want to know more. Like, you went rock climbing and you went skydiving, because what does that mean to me? It means this person has an adventurous spirit. I want that person on my team. I want that, or, someone who is like super, super intense about, like, they love cooking and they're so detail oriented. It says something about your personality that informs me about who you are in the workplace. And this is why we need to show up fully, 100% fully. And for the employers who don't recognize the value of that, that is not the place for you, because you cannot be your full self. You cannot be extraordinary if you are only 50%, or worse yet, 30, because you've censored yourself, or you've discouraged yourself, or you've demotivated yourself. By the way, I would not blame anybody else for that. I would accept full responsibility of being demotivated at work. 100% your responsibility. I just want to leave it there. But
but there you go.
You have a choice. You have a choice. You consistently, constantly Have a choice every moment of the day to choose how you will see things. You could see the optimistic side, or you could see the pessimistic side. And even when there's crappy things happening, there's always something here. But if you're focused on here, you never see here. It's like, yeah, I'm demotivated at work. I don't like this feeling that I'm feeling inside here in this company. Bravo, bravo, you've recognized something integral to your journey. Maybe that's not the place for you. Something needs to change. What are you going to do about it?
All right.
It sounds like an off tangent, but
yeah,
it's not an off tangent because it's about your story. It's about your story, and you get to be the writer of your own story. You say the power of storytelling. Storytelling is not a past event. It's also a future casting event to honor your book. What is the story you're about to tell? That's a story I want to read.
It's absolutely. And thank you for the can of whoop ass that you've opened on us, Angie. And also welcome to Philo, Jason, Brian, Michelle. We've had a number of people join, Robert. So one of the things, though, that Walter brought up and was also something that I thought of when you were talking about context and how important it was, Walter mentioned there's a cultural context, right, to sharing and being head of comms for Huawei, especially now, and in the past is certainly different and different cultures. And the other thing is, you know, we're going to put this up on YouTube and you don't get to control the context. So both in, you know, from a cultural context, evaluating context, and from the internet where, you know, for instance, all those things about telling your story, I remember from my TEDx talk going, this is ridiculous. Who wants to know my story? And then I couldn't control it. Like, it's out there. So how do you decide, you know, how do you sort of decide what the context is in an age where your things can go far and wide? And how do you decide how to modify when the reality is that the context might be very different from your personal
Totally.
decision or preference?
If you want to control everything, then don't say anything and I'll never hear your story. And I'm going to be really sad about that. If you want to control everything, every outcome, yeah, it's going to be messy. That's the whole point. You do not get to control how people feel about you. I'm sure somebody's going to watch this and go, what does this girl think she is? And what it's honestly, you know, I hope that I can't. I have to be respectful of the people in this room. I have to be respectful first and foremost to myself. Now, context. The cultural context is a great question, okay? Now, do you show up in a room and you just start potentially oversharing, right? Like oversharing in the fact that, did somebody invite you to share that? Did you impose yourself to insist to, you know, to plant your story or personality to, you know, and I use those words because sometimes, you know, in some cultures, it's not a big thing. Sometimes it's a small thing. And sharing is also about listening. Sharing is a conversation. Storytelling is a conversation. And remember what I said, when you advocate for the audience, the power of storytelling also comes from understanding the person to whom you're telling the story. And if you don't know, because the cultural context is unfamiliar to you, then it's sometimes just really nice to ask, as in, oh, how was your weekend? Oh, what do you like to do after work? Oh, do you have children? Oh, where do you, you know, how do you play with them on the weekend? And invite, and these are innocuous questions. They're lovely questions, but they also give you a lot of information, because the answer, their answer, informs you about how you can tell your story. Oh, yeah, I have a little boy too. And yeah, sometimes when it gets a little smoggy in Hong Kong, it's hard to know what to do. Oh, I just shared a little bit of my story based in context of this conversation. I didn't say, I am a mother of two. Sorry, I keep saying mother of two. I'm okay.
That's going to go viral. People start speculating, that'll be taken out of context.
So it's like, you don't just plant yourself. There's different styles of story, right? You don't just go once upon a time, because sometimes you say it in first person, sometimes it's third person, sometimes it's a limerick, sometimes it's a poem.
I've never done a limerick.
Sometimes
Wow.
it's a short story. Yeah.
But that brings me to Kurtie's question, which is, sometimes you can go in and you can suss out the context, and yes, you can't control, and I'll work on that privately. But the question that Kurtie has is, how can you do a presentation to a group of business leaders, for instance, where you don't necessarily know, and decide what level of vulnerability or showing vulnerability without necessarily knowing the context, and having to just go up and do that. That's something you're an expert at, for sure.
Sure. Okay. So I don't want you to think that vulnerability is a tactic. Okay. It is really the art of stripping and building up your confidence. Confidence, actually, that self-assuredness, this is where vulnerability comes from. So I really want to just be very clear that vulnerability is a journey. It is not to insert, okay? I don't want anybody to insert, I need to be vulnerable here, and then talk about whatever it is, and then go check mark. No, that's not. But so I'll give you an example of what I did, for example, at Hong Kong FinTech Week recently. So this, like the crowd was overflowing, like they had like I was told this later, like it was, the overflow room was overflowed, and like people couldn't get, like, okay, so now I tell this to you after the fact, because that is not what I was thinking about. Okay. Could have been 30 people in the room for all I cared. That was not what I was thinking about. So if you think about that, you're starting to get heart palpitations. Okay. So what was I thinking about? I was thinking about, because I had to kick off the event with introductory remarks that really tied people to this entire conference, like, welcome, right? But also, why are we here? And that's literally the question that I asked myself as I was thinking about what I wanted to say. These were not necessarily prepared remarks. They were kind of put into my iPad probably an hour before, because I wanted to feel the room. I wanted to feel the energy. I wanted to feel the societal and the business context. The first question I asked myself is, why is everybody here? Why did they show up? What's happening right now in corporate, in geopolitical, in regional terms? What's the common thread of people that, they're coming from industry, they're coming, like, why are they here at Hong Kong FinTech Week? There's a lot of really technology and And I mean, this is the power of storytelling, because listening is a huge, and then taking that and feeling it, and then wanting to connect with that feeling. Okay, that's empathy. That is empathy. And I walked out on stage and I was excited to be there. But I also knew that there was some stuff going down. And I simply spoke to that. You know, I actually think I even said, why are you here? Look to the person to the right and left. Why is anyone here? Because we're a community. We all showed up because we want to be inspired by the speakers, by each other. That you're probably sitting in the audience right now feeling like, I don't get half the stuff that's going on in my industry and I need to learn. Like that was just the sentiment in which I was trying to connect. So why is that vulnerability? It's vulnerable because I felt that way. Oh my God, I don't know, right? My entire online digital news platform is about the fact that I don't know everything, but we are in service to learning and learning aside, you know, the experts and finding the experts who can explain to me so I could explain to you. That's the journey, right? And so vulnerability allowed me to tap into that feeling, but also that excitement of, wow, I'm here because I want to learn more. I'm kind of intimidated by it, but it's okay, right? And then to call it out, that's also vulnerability, right? But it also bridges that emotional connection. It makes an emotional bridge and an emotional connection. So you can be the CEO of the biggest, and you know what? I have actually disarmed groups. I've actually said every company that exists today is a startup. And for those companies who do not understand that, they will not be here in 5 years from now. But all of you are here, so I welcome you. You know what I mean? You build that. Like, I honor the fact that you want to be here and you're going to be inspired and you're going to learn something and you're going to listen to things and you're going to hear things you've never heard before. Or maybe you have, but in a different context or different paradigm. And I hope that also inspires you. That empathy comes from a place of vulnerability. So that's a long answer to a short question.
It's fantastic. And I think it speaks to the fact that most people are afraid to have emotion be part of a business presentation, right? To bring in some of that vulnerability, because we have grown up with this sort of like this, you can have a graph in your business presentation, but you can't share a story about a human being in your business presentation.
Well, can I just say, this is the art of also something that I have learned. My job as a broadcaster, as a journalist, is to explain complex things simply and to make kind of, you know, boring things semi-interesting. Those are my skills. But why is that a skill? The skill comes from empathy. So you could have a chart, you could have a graph, okay, which is very sterile, very linear, very, right? But what if I picked this little dot? I said, okay, see this chart, blah, 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 hockey stick. But I want to show you this little dot right here at the beginning when it was 0. Let me tell you about this day. Let me tell you about the people in the room that served this day before it got to hockey stick. Like, and then suddenly people are like, I want to know more about this chart. What's happening with this graph? Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. It really brings it home to everyday experience and to many people rather than the 5 people in the room that have a similar background who can understand that based on their past. But so I have another question from Thea, and it is basically like, how do you pick yourself up from, from rejection or from oversharing or whatever it is, or even another question, which was from Ching, which was really like, when you pivot, and for instance, you sort of have this calling to do one thing, and then you decide it's actually going to be something else. And how do you either pick yourself back up, or explain it, or just deal with it?
Yeah, when I stopped feeling like I had to explain it.
So then what? You're sitting there. There's like, were you sitting there over coffee and you were like, forget it. I don't need to explain anything to anybody. Tell me about that little dot that one day before the hockey stick.
No, I wanted to have you feel that pregnant pause. I really wanted you to feel that, and it was for a fact. Obviously, I will tell you. But I owned not having to explain it. If it doesn't matter to me how you perceive it, why should I have to explain it? Even if it's really uncomfortable, and my beautiful friend Diana's like, oh my God, why isn't Angie answering this like really critical?
Is this mic on?
Hello. And it is meant to communicate to you that if you frame it in a way that other people will perceive it in a certain way, and then you have to explain that to answer that, you're simply digging that hole deeper and deeper and deeper, and it doesn't feel authentic, it doesn't feel right. And the fact is, it's none of anybody's business how I live my life, the decisions that I make that are very clear to me. If I choose to explain it, I will always explain it. I will tell you exactly why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I'm listening to my calling. I'm listening to my gut. It started when my beautiful little baby boy shook me out of my paradigm. And he shook me out of my matrix. When people get shaken out of their matrix, they become free. And they become free to explore. And that's what I did. I explored my heart. I explored my gut. I explored my instinct. And I started listening and honoring myself. And so if I wanted to do something super fun with my beautiful friend, Sarah Chessie, I literally just said, I wish I could do what you do. I just love it so much. Because, Sarah is the designer who did the capsule with me. She's like, let's do it. Why not? And you know what I said? Yeah, why not? And I did it in the month of garden leave before I started Li Ka-shing Foundation. People were like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know. This is really fun. Right? And the way that it inspired me was, I just want women to feel amazing. Like, I'm just sick of like clothes that are black and dowdy all the time. I want color. I want people to feel happy in in happy clothes. Like, I was inspired to do that. I could stay at Li Ka-shing Foundation. It was really an experience, but I was really just, I was like, I'm learning so much about myself that I realized I want to explore what that is. And then kind of realizing that I will always be the storyteller. I will always be the journalist. I just wasn't comfortable not being a journalist. I wasn't comfortable not being transparent and not telling stories. And, I wasn't comfortable. And so I simply listened to my gut. And I'm serving a community and an audience once again, wanting to learn more about emerging technology that is changing at a pace faster than anyone can comprehend. And we're doing that at Forkast. And we're doing it in a non-intimidating and sophisticated, incredible way that is kind of not, I recognize as a businesswoman, I'm a businesswoman. That's part of my story now. I will tell you that 50% of my conversations have nothing to do with content or story or editorial. It's about building a business. It's about growth. It's about strategy. I love it. I love it, right? I share all of these things with you because that's my story, and I'm happy to share it with you. But if I cared about how you were to judge any decision that I made, I would not be able to share as freely as possible, because the person who would be censoring me right now to filter to you so that you could like me would be me. And it would not come across, and it would be contrived. It would be artificial. And you know what? Maybe I'm really good at it, but I wouldn't resonate the way I know I'm resonating with you right now, because I'm bearing it all. And so how do you, pick yourself up from rejection and things like that? That's your work. That is your work. Will you fail? Yes, you will fail. Am I going to fail? Yes, I am going to fail. I will fall flat on my face. Things that I think about and want to execute on, I will probably fail. And I'm super excited about that. Because it is just another data point for me towards what eventually is going to be success. Success as maybe other people define it, but certainly the way I define it. And that's okay.
So I think that's a good way to look at it. And one of the things that I would say, just from observing the way that you've handled your transitions and how other people have, is that the world is a lot more forgiving of you than you are of yourself in terms of the changes you want to make.
No, honestly, people will pay attention for 3 seconds, say something snarky, and then forget all about it. And are you going to serve those people? I guess this was really I will share something with you, and I will just, and this might be oversharing, okay? This was really a struggle for me. This was a huge struggle for me. It was a huge struggle because I just really, when you're placed in a situation and you just want to make it, it's like, there's nothing I can do. Then you start sacrificing and carving out bits of yourself to please other people. Guys, I know that everybody has done this, okay? I'm right there with you. However, what I learned was, oh my God, that is not sustainable, guys. I literally woke up with a realization that I'm gonna suffer for the foreseeable future so that the 3 people whose voice I hear in my head won't say those things, and I'm gonna suffer for those people. Man, it was not worth it. It was not worth it. It was not worth it. But that is a decision that you have to make. And that is a lesson that sometimes life just sticks in your face, and you have to listen to that lesson. It might take some people longer than others to realize I am not going to suffer for what other people think of me. I must honor myself first. It's kind of like what I realized as a mother, having a child is completely abstract until it happens. No matter how many books you read, how many times people tell you about what you need to do to prepare, it's completely abstract until it happens, and then it's all hands on deck, and you think this is too much. You think, oh my God, I can't make that. I'm physically, emotionally, psychologically drained. I can't do this. Until you realize you can't do it if the only person you're serving is your baby, because you're the mother with the milk and the only person who can make sure this baby stays alive. So if you kill yourself, sacrifice your physical health, sacrifice your emotional health, and not do the things that take care of yourself, so that this baby can have a mother who is healthy and happy and in it to survive. It is recognizing that, man, if you're going to serve your community, your family, your friends, your network, your neighborhood, your audience, it might be an audience of your family. It doesn't matter. You must honor yourself first.
Well, I think that's fantastic. We have about 5 more minutes, or I guess a little bit less. So there's 2 things I think that are great, and then we've had a number of additional questions. So one of the questions I think that is really interesting is, and then, you know, maybe we can discuss that because I want you to tell people where you can be found. And then the second question, which seems like it's a can of worms, but is very interesting, is how in this this very divisive moment you can engage diverse audiences, almost engage the people that are on the other side of the aisle, which might even be like a whole separate hour-long podcast. It's important. So what do you think, Angie? Do you think we should go for that one, or do you think we should maybe write an article about it together or something? What do you think? Do you have an easy answer?
Whatever you want to do. So I put the website and my email in the box, so then you can like hang out and send me messages. I'm so happy to.
Oh, awesome.
And if you think that I'm super happy to do this. I say that you find that common thread. I know that I don't agree with everyone, nor will everyone agree with me. And that's the whole point. The whole point is, if I'm not going to share my full self, with the bravery and the courage to know that not everybody is going to agree with me, right? And sometimes it's knowing your audience. Sometimes they don't want to hear that stuff, but they will also always know that I don't agree with them, right? But what I always find is that spirit of commonality. Look, we all love our children. We all desire to be better. We all desire to have impact on our communities. And sometimes we come through it through different perspectives. And the disagreements come when we don't share, when we miscommunicate, or when we don't communicate enough, and we presume and assume. This is the source of every conflict in the world, even the most innocuous ones to the most violent ones. It often comes from, hey, you're not listening to me. You are not listening to me. And so it's like, I'm listening to you. I want to understand. I want to hear more. I might not agree, but here's my perspective. What do you think about it? Oh my God, it feels so great, right? 2 people disagreeing, but wanting to listen to the other person. So I would say that, find that common thread of desire of, like, yeah, it's an echo chamber. That echo chamber comes from fear. That echo chamber comes from a desire to only talk to the people who are going to like you. That's just not going to happen. And the courage comes from bringing the full diversity of yourself and understanding the audience, but also understanding enough to honor the differences. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, I do want to share one critical thing, because there was a question, is like, what are the common mistakes that people have when they share their story? And I experienced this yesterday. And I want to share this because this might be really, really helpful. When you give me your 30-second pitch or you introduce yourself, right? Obviously, understand the person to whom you're speaking, right? But sometimes in a professional setting, like, there is just a proclivity to share a chronological resume. I'm this, and then I did this, and then I did this. Like, I literally can read this on your LinkedIn. And I probably won't, because you just bored me. I didn't get to know you. I want to know you. And so that opportunity is about touch and go, touch and go, touch and go. I'm an editor-in-chief and CEO and founder of Forkast.news. It's a startup. And man, it feels like raising a baby. It is literally like feeding a baby every day. Sometimes in the middle of the night, it wakes up and it says, "Mama, you got to pay attention to me." And, you know, like that, then all of a sudden, so I gave you the headline, the thing on my LinkedIn, but then I gave you my humanity, and I gave you a little bit of vulnerability, and I gave you a little bit of humor, and I shared a little bit more about my perspective, right? And so these are the opportunities to share your story without having to go, I am a this, and then I did this, and then I did this, right? Maybe you're a skydiver. I love skydiving, which kind of, in a roundabout way led me to what I'm doing today, which is, I work for, and because this is a company that is as adventuresome, and the people there are just crazy and wild, and I love that energy, and I just believe that it is about taking risks. This is a company that takes risks. Like, give me the context that explains your story. I hope that's helpful.
I think it is, and we have a ton of additional questions coming in, which unfortunately we won't have time to answer because you have to get back to your
no, I'll stay.
Human
but I know
baby
you have to go.
and your startup baby. But I think that I have, I'll post it, and I've taken notes as well. And I think that the idea that you just mentioned of really like never miss an opportunity as you tell your story to connect and to share and to listen to other people, I think is really important. So I think that's a great takeaway. And I see on the chat, for anybody who hasn't figured out the chat button, it's www.forkast.news. That's FORKAST, fork like spoon and fork, and asked like asked .news. And you can also, we've posted Angie's Twitter into the chat, and I will also share your Twitter, and when we have edited things, we'll post it on Twitter for you and tag you as well. So thank you so much, and thank you all of you guys for coming on, and we'll let you know via email when we post it so that you can have a look of any parts you missed and continue the conversation on social media, I guess, and in person.
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks, guys, for having me.
All right, thank you.
And I can't wait to hear your stories.
Yeah, me too. A lot of inspiration. Thanks so much, Angie. Really appreciate it.